2 years after the mountain rescue that had changed her life, Captain Sarah Martinez stood before a joint session of Congress, preparing to testify about the Tactical Innovation Division's impact on military readiness and effectiveness. The hearing room was packed with senators, representatives, military officials, and journalists who had come to learn about programs that were being hailed as revolutionary advances in military training and doctrine. Chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Robert Hayes, called the session to order and introduced Martinez with a citation that summarized achievements that still seemed surreal to her. Captain Martinez, your leadership of the Tactical Innovation Division has resulted in training programs that have been implemented throughout all branches of the military, with measurable improvements in unit effectiveness and combat readiness. Martinez had spent weeks preparing for this testimony, working with legislative liaison officers and policy analysts to translate technical training data into information that civilian policymakers could understand and evaluate. The stakes were significant. The Tactical Innovation Division's continued funding and expansion depended on convincing Congress that the program provided genuine value for defense spending. Senators and representatives, thank you for the opportunity to brief you on the Tactical Innovation Division's progress and results. Over the past 2 years, we have established training programs in 12 combat specialties, trained over 8,000 military personnel, and documented significant improvements in unit performance across all services. Senator Maria Rodriguez from Texas, herself a veteran of Operation Desert Storm, leaned forward with obvious interest. Captain Martinez, can you provide specific examples of how your programs have improved military effectiveness in actual combat operations? Martinez activated the presentation system and displayed a map showing recent military operations where TID-trained units had participated. Senator Rodriguez, units that have completed our programs show 35% better performance in complex terrain operations, 28% improved coordination in joint operations, and 42% better adaptation to unexpected tactical situations. The statistics represented thousands of hours of data collection and analysis, but Martinez knew that the real impact was measured in lives saved and missions accomplished by soldiers who had learned to think beyond conventional limitations. Congressman David Park from California asked about cost effectiveness. Captain Martinez, these programs require significant investment in specialized equipment and instructor training. How do you justify the expense when military budgets are under constant pressure? Martinez had anticipated this question and prepared a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis that had been reviewed by Pentagon budget officials. Congressman Park, our analysis shows that every dollar invested in tactical innovation training saves approximately $4 in equipment costs and operational efficiency over a 3-year period. More importantly, improved training reduces casualty rates, which provides benefits that cannot be measured purely in financial terms. Senator Patricia Williams from Montana, no relation to General Williams, asked about program expansion. Captain Martinez, your written testimony mentions plans to extend these training methods to allied military forces. What would be the strategic benefits of such cooperation? The question touched on one of Martinez's most ambitious goals for the Tactical Innovation Division. Senator Williams, we've received requests for training cooperation from 15 allied nations who have observed our program results. Providing this training would strengthen interoperability with allied forces and demonstrate American leadership in military innovation. As the hearing continued, Martinez found herself thinking about the 8 Navy SEALs whose desperate situation in Afghanistan had started this entire journey. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez had recently visited Fort Leavenworth to observe training exercises and had been amazed to see the systematic programs that had emerged from his team's rescue. Captain Martinez, Rodriguez had said during his visit, "When I called for help from that mountain in Afghanistan, I never imagined it would lead to programs that are training soldiers around the world. Our team's survival has had consequences that none of us could have predicted." Representative James Thompson from Georgia asked about innovation methodology. Captain Martinez, how do you identify soldiers whose practical experience should be developed into systematic training programs? Martinez described the selection process that the TID had developed for identifying outstanding performers whose experience could benefit the broader military community. Representative Thompson, we look for soldiers who have achieved exceptional results in challenging conditions, demonstrated innovative problem solving, and shown the ability to teach others. Most importantly, we look for people who are motivated by a desire to help their fellow soldiers succeed. The selection criteria had evolved from Martinez's own experience and the factors that had made her crew successful in Afghanistan. Technical competence was important, but the most valuable instructors were those who combined expertise with genuine commitment to helping others. Senator Hayes asked about future development. Captain Martinez, where do you see the Tactical Innovation Division in 5 years? What new capabilities are you working to develop? Martinez had spent considerable time thinking about the long-term evolution of military training and the role that tactical innovation could play in maintaining American military superiority. Senator Hayes, we're developing programs that will allow military units to adapt more quickly to new threats and changing technological conditions. Our goal is to create a military force that can learn and innovate faster than any potential adversary. The vision was ambitious but grounded in practical experience. Martinez had seen how quickly tactical situations could change in combat, and she understood that the military's ability to adapt would be crucial for future success. During a brief recess, Martinez was approached by Colonel James Fletcher from the Armor School, who had flown in from Fort Knox to provide technical support for her testimony. Captain, the hearing seems to be going well. The committee members appeared genuinely impressed with the program results. Fletcher had become one of the strongest advocates for the Tactical Innovation Division within the Army's institutional structure. His support had been crucial for gaining acceptance from traditional training establishments that were initially skeptical of approaches that challenged conventional doctrine. Colonel, I think they understand that we're not just talking about improved training methods. We're talking about a fundamental change in how the military develops and maintains its competitive advantage. When the hearing reconvened, Representative Sarah Kim from Washington asked about technology integration. Captain Martinez, how do your programs incorporate emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and advanced simulation systems? Martinez described the TID's partnership with technology companies and research institutions to develop training systems that could replicate complex battlefield conditions. Representative Kim, we use advanced simulation to allow soldiers to practice dangerous or expensive techniques safely and repeatedly. However, our core philosophy remains focused on human decision-making and adaptive thinking rather than technological solutions. The balance between technology and human capability was something Martinez had thought about extensively. While advanced systems could enhance training effectiveness, the most important military capabilities still depended on individual soldiers making good decisions under pressure. Senator Rodriguez asked about lessons learned. Captain Martinez, what have been the most important discoveries from your 2 years of leading this division? The question prompted Martinez to reflect on insights that had emerged from working with outstanding soldiers from across the military. Senator Rodriguez, we've learned that exceptional performance usually comes from people who are willing to think beyond conventional limitations while maintaining absolute commitment to mission accomplishment and the welfare of their fellow soldiers. It was a lesson that applied far beyond military training. The most valuable innovations often came from practitioners who combined deep expertise with willingness to challenge assumptions and take calculated risks. As the hearing concluded, Senator Hayes summarized the committee's assessment. Captain Martinez, this committee is impressed with the Tactical Innovation Division's achievements and believes that continued investment in these programs will provide significant benefits for national security. You and your team have demonstrated how individual initiative can evolve into institutional capabilities that strengthen our entire military force. After the hearing, Martinez was approached by General Patricia Williams, now a 4-star general and Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. General Williams had continued to serve as a mentor and advocate throughout Martinez's career progression. Captain Martinez, that was outstanding testimony. You've successfully articulated the value of tactical innovation in terms that policymakers can understand and support. The Tactical Innovation Division is now positioned for continued growth and influence. Martinez felt a deep sense of satisfaction that was tempered by awareness of the responsibilities that came with success. General Williams, I'm grateful for your continued support and guidance. None of this would have been possible without your willingness to take risks on unproven concepts. Captain, you're about to be promoted to Major and assigned as Deputy Director of a new Pentagon office focused on military innovation. Your success at Fort Leavenworth has demonstrated that tactical innovation can be systematized and scaled across the entire military. The assignment would represent another fundamental change in Martinez's career trajectory. Instead of focusing on specific training programs, she would be responsible for identifying and developing innovations across all aspects of military operations. General, what would be the scope of the Pentagon assignment? Major Martinez, you would be responsible for establishing innovation programs throughout the military, working directly with senior leadership to identify and develop capabilities that will maintain American military superiority for the next generation. As Martinez considered the new assignment, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. What had started as a split-second decision to help 8 Navy SEALs had evolved into a career dedicated to helping military personnel maximize their capabilities and effectiveness. That evening, Martinez called her original tank crew, now scattered across various assignments throughout the military, to share news about the Pentagon assignment and reflect on their collective achievements. Captain Foster, now serving as senior instructor at the Tactical Innovation Division, listened with the pride of someone who had helped build something larger than any individual contribution. "Ma'am, when we took the tank up into those mountains in Afghanistan, we were just trying to help some fellow soldiers who were in trouble. I don't think any of us imagined it would lead to programs that are changing how the entire military trains and operates." Martinez realized that Foster had identified the key factor that had made their success possible. They had focused on helping others rather than seeking recognition or advancement for themselves. That commitment had created a foundation of trust and cooperation that made everything else possible. "Foster, I think that's exactly why our programs have been successful. When people see that we're genuinely committed to helping them become more effective soldiers rather than promoting our own careers, they're willing to embrace new ideas and challenge traditional assumptions." As Martinez prepared for her new assignment at the Pentagon, she reflected on the broader implications of her experience. The Tactical Innovation Division had proven that military organizations could systematically capture and disseminate practical knowledge from their most effective practitioners. More importantly, it had demonstrated that individual initiative and creative problem-solving could be encouraged and rewarded within large institutional structures. The 8 Navy SEALs who had been facing certain death in the mountains of Afghanistan probably had no idea that their rescue had initiated changes that were now being implemented throughout the American military. Their survival had become a symbol of what was possible when soldiers were willing to risk everything to help their fellow warriors, and that example continued to inspire innovations that were making military forces more effective around the world. The program that had begun with one tank crew's determination to save fellow soldiers had evolved into a permanent transformation of how the military developed and maintained its competitive advantage. It was a legacy that honored the courage of everyone who had chosen to put their lives at risk in service of others, and it ensured that their sacrifice would continue to protect and inspire future generations of American service members. 6 months later, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of a training area at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, watching as an M1 Abrams tank negotiated a series of obstacles that would have been considered impossible just a year ago. The tank was being driven by a young sergeant from Georgia who had never seen mountains higher than the Appalachians, but he was successfully navigating artificial terrain features that mimicked the challenges Martinez's crew had faced in Afghanistan. "Sergeant Williams, bring her up another 10 degrees and maintain steady throttle control," Martinez called into her radio headset. "Remember, the key is smooth power application, not brute force." The massive tank responded perfectly, its tracks finding purchase on loose gravel and steep inclines that had been carefully engineered to replicate the conditions that tank crews might encounter in mountainous combat zones around the world. What had once been considered impossible was now becoming routine through systematic training and carefully developed techniques. Captain James Foster, formerly Sergeant Foster, approached Martinez with a clipboard full of evaluation forms and the satisfied expression of someone watching his expertise being validated on a grand scale. His promotion had come through as part of his reassignment to the Mountain Armor Tactics Development Program, and he was now responsible for training drivers from across the Army in advanced terrain navigation techniques. "Ma'am, Sergeant Williams just completed the advanced course in record time. His performance metrics are actually better than some of our instructors achieved when we first developed the training standards." Martinez reviewed the evaluation scores with growing satisfaction. The Mountain Armor Tactics Development Program had exceeded every expectation that General Williams had established when she first proposed the initiative. What had started as lessons learned from a single rescue operation had evolved into a comprehensive training program that was fundamentally changing how the Army approached armored warfare. Foster, how many crews have we trained through the program so far? We've put 240 tank crews through the basic course and 87 through the advanced program. Every crew that completes our training receives certification for mountain armor operations, and we're getting requests from commanders worldwide who want these capabilities for their units. The success of the training program had surprised even its strongest advocates. Tank crews who completed the mountain armor course demonstrated not just improved technical skills but enhanced tactical thinking and problem-solving abilities that made them more effective in all types of terrain. Martinez walked over to the observation tower where Colonel Patricia Chen, the program's director, was monitoring training exercises through high-powered binoculars. Colonel Chen had been promoted specifically to oversee the development of mountain armor capabilities, and her leadership had been crucial in transforming practical innovations into systematic training methods. "Colonel, what's the assessment from yesterday's evaluation team?" Colonel Chen lowered her binoculars and smiled with the expression of someone delivering particularly good news. The Pentagon evaluation team was impressed beyond their expectations. They're recommending immediate expansion of the program and integration of our methods into standard armor training at Fort Knox. The Pentagon evaluation had been the crucial test for determining whether the Mountain Armor Tactics Development Program would continue as a specialized course or become part of basic armor training for all tank crews. Martinez had spent weeks preparing demonstrations and briefing materials to convince senior officials that the capabilities they had developed were worth the investment required for Army-wide implementation. They were particularly interested in our crew performance data, Colonel Chen continued. Tank crews trained through our program show 30% better performance ratings in standard combat exercises, even in terrain that doesn't require specialized mountain techniques. The training methods we've developed seem to improve overall tactical effectiveness across all types of operations. Martinez felt a deep sense of satisfaction that was different from anything she had experienced during combat operations. Saving 8 Navy SEALs in Afghanistan had been intensely personal and immediate. Developing training methods that could save countless lives in future operations was more abstract but potentially far more significant. "Ma'am, there's something else. General Williams wants to see you this afternoon. She has news about the next phase of program development." General Williams had become a powerful advocate for the Mountain Armor Tactics Development Program, using her influence throughout the Army to secure resources and support for continued expansion. Her vision extended far beyond just training tank crews to operate in mountains. She saw the program as a model for how the Army could encourage tactical innovation and adaptive thinking throughout all combat specialties. Martinez spent the morning observing training exercises and reviewing performance data with her team of instructors. The program had grown from her crew's practical experience into a sophisticated educational system with standardized curricula, certified instructors, and measurable learning objectives. Watching young soldiers master techniques that her crew had developed through trial and error in combat gave her a profound sense of accomplishment. At 1,400 hours, Martinez reported to General Williams' office at the Combined Arms Center headquarters. The General's office reflected her personality, professional but approachable, with military awards and unit photographs mixed with technical manuals and tactical journals. "Lieutenant Martinez, please have a seat. I have some interesting news about your program's future." Martinez noted that General Williams had emphasized your program, recognizing her as the originator and driving force behind the tactical innovations that had made everything else possible. "General," Colonel Chen mentioned that the Pentagon evaluation was favorable. "Are we getting approval for expansion?" General Williams smiled with the expression of someone about to deliver news that would exceed all expectations. "Lieutenant, we're not just getting approval for expansion. The Secretary of Defense has designated the Mountain Armor Tactics Development Program as a model for tactical innovation throughout the Army. You're being promoted to captain and assigned to establish similar programs for other combat specialties." The news was so unexpected that Martinez found herself momentarily speechless. She had assumed that the mountain armor program represented the peak of what could be accomplished based on her crew's experiences in Afghanistan. "General, I'm honored by the promotion and the assignment, but I'm not sure I understand the scope of what you're describing." General Williams activated her computer display and showed Martinez an organizational chart that outlined an ambitious expansion of tactical innovation programs. "Captain Martinez, the Army has realized that some of our most valuable tactical innovations come from soldiers who are actually employing equipment and techniques in combat conditions. We want to systematically capture that practical knowledge and transform it into improved training for all soldiers." The chart showed proposed programs for mountain infantry tactics, aviation operations in extreme conditions, logistics support in hostile environments, and communication systems in degraded conditions. Each program would be led by someone who had demonstrated exceptional practical expertise in their specialty. "You'll be the director of the Tactical Innovation Division, responsible for identifying outstanding performers in various specialties and helping them develop their practical experience into systematic training programs. Your success with mountain armor tactics has proven that this approach can work." Martinez realized that she was being offered an opportunity to have an impact far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Instead of just improving tank operations, she would be helping to enhance the effectiveness of soldiers throughout the Army. "General, this is an extraordinary opportunity, but I have to ask about my crew. Foster and the others have been essential to our program's success. Would they be part of the expanded organization?" General Williams looked pleased that Martinez's first concern was for her team members. "Captain Martinez, your entire crew will receive promotions and assignments within the new division. Foster will become the senior non-commissioned officer for the entire program. The Army recognizes that the success of these initiatives depends on combining experienced leadership with practical expertise." As Martinez considered the implications of her new assignment, she thought about the 8 Navy SEALs whose desperate situation had started this entire chain of events. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez and his team had survived their mountain ordeal and completed their deployment successfully. They probably had no idea that their rescue had led to fundamental changes in Army training methods. "General, when would the new assignment begin?" "Captain Martinez, you'll assume your new responsibilities next month. However, there's one more thing. The Navy has requested that you provide mountain armor training for Marine Corps units that operate in similar terrain. Apparently, word of your program's success has spread throughout the military." The request from the Navy represented validation from an unexpected source. The Marine Corps was known for tactical innovation and aggressive training standards. Their interest in Army mountain armor tactics suggested that the program had achieved recognition as genuinely valuable rather than just organizationally popular. "General, I'd be honored to work with Marine Corps units. Some of my most valuable combat experience came from joint operations with Marines in Iraq." Over the next hour, General Williams outlined the scope and timeline for establishing the Tactical Innovation Division. Martinez would have a staff of 12 officers and 30 enlisted personnel, with authority to identify and recruit outstanding performers from throughout the Army. The division would have its own budget, training facilities, and direct reporting relationship to senior Army leadership. "Captain Martinez, your rescue of those Navy SEALs 6 months ago has had consequences that none of us anticipated. Your willingness to take risks to save fellow soldiers has evolved into a systematic program for improving military effectiveness. That's the kind of impact that defines truly exceptional military careers." As Martinez left General Williams' office, she reflected on the unexpected trajectory her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been a tank commander conducting routine training exercises in Afghanistan. Today, she was being assigned to lead a division-level organization responsible for tactical innovation throughout the Army. The drive back to her quarters took her past the training areas where tank crews were practicing the mountain tactics that had emerged from her crew's combat experience. Watching young soldiers master techniques that had saved 8 Navy SEALs in the mountains of Afghanistan gave her a profound sense of continuity and purpose. That evening, Martinez called her crew together to share the news about their promotions and new assignments. Sergeant First Class Foster, now Captain Foster, listened to the briefing with the satisfied expression of someone watching years of hard work receive appropriate recognition. Ma'am, I have to say that when we took the tank up into the mountains to help those SEALs, I never imagined it would lead to all this. We were just doing our jobs and helping fellow soldiers who needed assistance." Martinez realized that Foster had captured something important about military service and leadership. The most significant accomplishments often came from people who were simply focused on doing their jobs well and helping others succeed. "Foster, I think that's exactly why our program has been successful. We weren't trying to revolutionize tank tactics or develop innovative training methods. We were just trying to save 8 Navy SEALs who were facing certain death. Everything else grew from that basic commitment to supporting fellow soldiers." As the meeting concluded, Martinez looked forward to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The Tactical Innovation Division would allow her to help other soldiers transform their combat experience into systematic improvements for the entire Army. It was a mission that honored the legacy of 8 Navy SEALs whose desperate situation in the mountains of Afghanistan had started an unexpected revolution in military training and tactics. The program that had begun with one tank crew's willingness to risk everything to save fellow soldiers was about to become a permanent part of how the Army developed and maintained its competitive advantage in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. The helicopter flight to Bagram Air Base gave Lieutenant Sarah Martinez 45 minutes to review the stack of reports that Major Torres had provided, and what she read fundamentally changed her understanding of what had happened during the mountain rescue operation. The documents weren't just routine after-action reports, they were detailed tactical analyses written by some of the most experienced military professionals in Afghanistan. The first report had been filed by Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez and provided a minute-by-minute account of the rescue from the Navy SEAL's perspective. Reading Rodriguez's professional assessment of her tank crew's performance, Martinez realized that what she had considered standard tactical procedures had been viewed by the SEALs as nothing short of miraculous. Lieutenant Martinez demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness and innovative employment of armored assets in terrain previously considered impossible for M1 Abrams operations, Rodriguez had written. Her crew's ability to traverse steep mountain slopes while maintaining accurate fire support capabilities represents a significant advancement in combined arms tactics for mountainous terrain. The second report came from an unexpected source, an Army aviation unit that had been conducting surveillance operations in the area during the rescue. The helicopter crew had witnessed the entire operation from a distance and provided an aerial perspective that Martinez hadn't considered. Iron Thunder's movement through grid square 47823 required navigation of slopes exceeding 30 degrees, loose rock formations, and multiple terrain obstacles that would challenge experienced mountain climbers, the aviation report stated. The tank crew's ability to maintain tactical effectiveness while operating in such conditions suggests training and skill levels far above standard Army requirements. But it was the third report that truly surprised Martinez. It had been filed by Colonel David Chen of the 10th Mountain Division, one of the most experienced mountain warfare commanders in the Army. Apparently, he had been monitoring radio traffic during the rescue operation and had immediately recognized the tactical significance of what was happening. Lieutenant Martinez's employment of M1 Abrams capabilities in extreme terrain represents a potential paradigm shift in how the Army approaches mountain warfare, Colonel Chen had written. Traditional doctrine assumes that heavy armor cannot operate effectively in mountainous regions. This operation proves that assumption may be incorrect when crews are properly trained and equipment is skillfully employed. As the helicopter approached Bagram Air Base, Martinez could see the sprawling complex of runways, hangars, and administrative buildings that served as the hub for military operations throughout eastern Afghanistan. Somewhere in that maze of structures, General Patricia Williams was waiting to discuss tactical innovations that Martinez was only beginning to understand. The helicopter landed at a VIP pad near the base headquarters, and Martinez was immediately met by a young captain who introduced himself as General Williams A. Ducka. Captain Michael Stevens was clearly a fast-track officer with the kind of crisp professionalism that suggested he was being groomed for rapid promotion. "Lieutenant Martinez, the general is eager to meet with you. She's cleared her entire afternoon schedule to discuss your recent operations. She's also arranged for several other officers to participate in the briefing, people who specialize in armored tactics and mountain warfare." As they walked through the headquarters complex, Captain Stevens provided background information that helped Martinez understand the scope of interest her rescue operation had generated. The General has been advocating for increased tactical flexibility in mountain operations for several years. Your tank crew's performance has provided practical validation for some theories she's been developing about combined arms employment in difficult terrain. The briefing room was larger than Martinez had expected, with sophisticated audiovisual equipment and seating for about 20 people. When she entered, she was surprised to see that about half the seats were already occupied by officers representing various specialties within the Army's organizational structure. General Patricia Williams stood at the front of the room, and Martinez was immediately impressed by her commanding presence. Williams was a compact woman in her early 50s with graying hair and the kind of alert, intelligent eyes that suggested she missed nothing important. Her uniform displayed the ribbons and badges of someone who had earned respect through competence and leadership rather than political connections. "Lieutenant Martinez, please have a seat. I've assembled a group of people who are very interested in learning about your tactical methods." General Williams gestured toward the assembled officers. "We have representatives from the Armor School, the Mountain Warfare School, the Combined Arms Center, and several operational units that regularly work in mountainous terrain." Martinez recognized that this wasn't a disciplinary hearing, it was a professional development session focused on extracting lessons learned from her rescue operation. The realization was both relieving and intimidating. "General, I should mention that I didn't consider my actions particularly innovative at the time. I was simply responding to an immediate tactical situation with available resources." General Williams smiled with the expression of someone who had heard similar statements from many outstanding officers over the years. "Lieutenant, the best tactical innovations often come from people who don't realize they're being innovative. They're just solving problems with whatever tools are available." The General activated the room's projection system, and Martinez was surprised to see a detailed topographical map of the area where the rescue had taken place. The map showed not just terrain features but also the exact route her tank had taken through the mountains. "Lieutenant Martinez, this map was created using GPS data from your tank's navigation system, combined with observations from multiple sources who witnessed your movement. What we're seeing here challenges fundamental assumptions about where M1 Abrams tanks can and cannot operate effectively." Martinez studied the map and realized that seeing the route from this perspective made her crew's accomplishments seem even more remarkable. The path they had taken involved slopes, rock formations, and narrow passages that would have challenged experienced rock climbers, much less a 60-ton armored vehicle. Colonel James Fletcher from the Armor School stood up and activated a laser pointer to highlight specific portions of the route. "Lieutenant, we've analyzed your movement pattern, and there are several points where our standard doctrine would have considered further advance impossible. How did you determine that your tank could negotiate these obstacles?" Martinez thought carefully about how to answer that question. The truth was that many of her decisions had been based on instinct, experience, and trust in her driver's skills rather than careful analysis of technical specifications. "Sir, my driver, Sergeant Foster, grew up operating heavy equipment in mountainous terrain in West Virginia. When he told me he thought we could make it through a particular passage, I trusted his judgment. We also conducted careful reconnaissance at each major obstacle, using team members as ground guides when necessary." Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Patterson from the Mountain Warfare School leaned forward with obvious interest. "Lieutenant, standard mountain warfare doctrine assumes that heavy armor cannot provide effective support to infantry units operating above certain altitudes and in terrain with specific slope characteristics. Your operation proves that assumption may be incorrect. What training or preparation enabled your crew to operate effectively in such conditions?" Martinez realized that she was being asked to explain capabilities that her crew had developed through experience rather than formal training. "Ma'am, we've been operating in Afghanistan for 8 months, and we've gradually pushed the boundaries of what we thought our tank could do. Each mission taught us something new about our equipment's capabilities and limitations." General Williams nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of adaptive learning that we need to encourage throughout the Army. Too often, we limit our tactical options based on theoretical limitations rather than practical experimentation." The General activated another map display that showed the broader tactical situation during the rescue operation. Lieutenant Martinez, your decision to divert from your training route to support the Navy SEALs represents exactly the kind of initiative and tactical flexibility that modern combat requires. However, we need to understand how to encourage such thinking while maintaining proper command and control. Major Robert Kim from the Combined Arms Center raised a question that Martinez had been expecting. Lieutenant, you made a significant tactical decision without direct authorization from higher command. How do we balance the need for initiative with the requirement for coordinated operations? It was a fair question that went to the heart of military leadership philosophy. Martinez had spent considerable time thinking about this issue since the rescue operation. Sir, I believe that senior commanders need to provide clear guidance about their intent and priorities, then trust junior leaders to execute missions using their best tactical judgment. In this case, the overall intent was clear: protect American forces and complete the mission. The specific authorization was less important than achieving the desired outcome. General Williams stood up and walked to the map display, using her pointer to trace the rescue operations timeline. Ladies and gentlemen, what Lieutenant Martinez has described is exactly what we mean when we talk about mission-type orders and decentralized execution. She understood the commander's intent, assessed the tactical situation, and took appropriate action to achieve the desired outcome. Colonel Fletcher from the Armor School raised another technical question. Lieutenant, your operation required precise coordination between your tank crew, dismounted infantry, and indirect fire support. How did you maintain effective communication and coordination in such challenging terrain? Martinez described the radio procedures and coordination methods her crew had used, emphasizing the importance of clear communication protocols and backup plans. As she talked, she noticed that several officers were taking detailed notes, suggesting that her tactical methods were being evaluated for possible inclusion in formal training programs. The key, Martinez concluded, was maintaining constant communication with all supported units and being prepared to adjust tactics instantly based on changing battlefield conditions. Mountain terrain creates unique communication challenges, but it also provides opportunities for tactical surprise that aren't available in other environments. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson asked about crew training requirements. Lieutenant, what specific skills and knowledge would be required to train other tank crews to operate effectively in mountainous terrain? Martinez thought about Sergeant Foster's background and the other factors that had contributed to their success. Ma'am, I believe the most important factor is having crew members with experience operating heavy equipment in difficult terrain. Technical skills can be taught, but the kind of instinctive understanding of vehicle capabilities that's needed for this type of operation usually comes from practical experience. General Williams concluded the briefing by outlining several initiatives that would be developed based on lessons learned from Martinez's rescue operation. We're going to establish a mountain armor tactics development program that will systematically explore the capabilities Lieutenant Martinez has demonstrated. We're also going to modify our training programs to encourage the kind of tactical flexibility and initiative that made this rescue possible. As the briefing concluded, Martinez realized that her split-second decision to help 8 Navy SEALs had evolved into something much larger. The tactical methods her crew had developed through practical experience were now being analyzed for possible adoption throughout the Army's armored forces. Captain Stevens approached Martinez as the other officers filed out of the briefing room. Lieutenant, the General would like to speak with you privately for a few minutes. She has a proposition that she thinks might interest you. Martinez wondered what kind of proposition a 3-star general might have for a lieutenant who had recently been facing possible court-martial proceedings. As she waited for the room to clear, she reflected on how dramatically her circumstances had changed in just a few hours. General Williams waited until they were alone before speaking. Lieutenant Martinez, I've been advocating for tactical innovations in mountain warfare for several years, but I've lacked practical examples to support my arguments. Your rescue operation has provided exactly the kind of real-world validation that Pentagon officials require before they'll approve new training programs and doctrinal changes. Martinez listened carefully, sensing that the general was leading towards something significant. I'm offering you an opportunity to help develop and implement new mountain armor tactics for the entire Army. It would mean temporary assignment to the Combined Arms Center at Fort Leavenworth, working directly with the people who write doctrine and design training programs. You'd have the chance to turn your practical experience into formal knowledge that could save lives throughout the Army. The offer was more than Martinez had ever imagined, but it also represented a fundamental change in her military career path. Instead of commanding tanks in combat zones, she would be developing the theories and training methods that would guide other tank commanders. General, I'm honored by the offer, but I have to ask, what about my crew? Sergeant Foster and the others were essential to our success. Any training program based on our methods would need their input and expertise. General Williams smiled with genuine appreciation. Lieutenant, that's exactly the kind of thinking that convinced me you're the right person for this assignment. Your entire crew would be reassigned to Fort Leavenworth to help develop the new training program. Their practical experience is just as valuable as your tactical leadership. As Martinez considered the offer, she realized that accepting would mean leaving Afghanistan and the immediate combat operations that had defined her military experience. However, it also represented an opportunity to have a much broader impact on Army capabilities and potentially save countless lives through improved training and tactics. General, I accept the assignment. When would you need us to report to Fort Leavenworth? Lieutenant Martinez, you and your crew will be returning to the United States next week. The Army has decided that your expertise is too valuable to risk in routine combat operations. Your new mission is to ensure that every tank crew in the Army can do what you did 3 days ago when 8 Navy SEALs needed someone willing to drive through impossible terrain to save their lives. 3 days after the mountain rescue, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez sat in the sterile conference room at Forward Operating Base Chapman, staring at a stack of paperwork that seemed to grow larger every time she looked away. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with the kind of persistent buzz that made concentration difficult, and the air conditioning struggled against the oppressive heat of the Afghan summer. Across from her sat Colonel James Harrison, the base commander, whose weathered face showed the strain of managing operations in one of the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan. Behind him stood Major Rebecca Torres, the base legal officer, her expression unreadable as she reviewed the thick folder containing Martinez's service record. Lieutenant Martinez, Colonel Harrison began, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through 3 decades of military service. Your actions 3 days ago have created quite a stir up the chain of command. I've received calls from generals, Pentagon officials, and even a few politicians who somehow got wind of what happened. Martinez kept her expression neutral, though her stomach felt like it was doing aerial maneuvers. She had known this moment would come. Taking an M1 Abrams tank off its designated training route to engage in unauthorized combat operations was the kind of decision that could end a military career faster than a Taliban IED could end a life. Sir, I understand that my actions may have violated protocol. However, 8 Navy SEALs were facing certain death or capture, and no other support was available in the timeframe required to save their lives. Major Torres looked up from her folder with the expression of someone who had seen too many young officers destroy promising careers with well-intentioned but poorly considered decisions. Lieutenant, you diverted from an authorized training mission without permission from higher command. You engaged enemy forces without proper authorization. You risked valuable military equipment in terrain that had not been assessed for armored vehicle operations. Any one of these actions could result in court-martial proceedings. The words hung in the air like smoke from an IED explosion. Martinez had spent the last 3 days replaying her decision over and over, examining it from every angle, looking for alternatives she might have missed. Each time, she reached the same conclusion: given the same circumstances, she would make the exact same choice. Ma'am, with respect, I made a tactical decision based on available information and immediate circumstances. The SEAL team had no other support available, weather had grounded all aircraft, and they were minutes away from being overrun. Sometimes leadership means making hard choices without perfect information or complete authorization. Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying Martinez with the kind of intense scrutiny that had intimidated countless junior officers over the years. Lieutenant, do you understand the precedent your actions could set? If every tank commander decided to go off on unauthorized rescue missions whenever they heard a radio call for help, we'd have chaos instead of military discipline. Sir, I understand the importance of military discipline and following proper procedures. However, I also understand that military discipline exists to serve a higher purpose, protecting American lives and completing the mission. In this case, the mission was clear even if the authorization was not. Major Torres made a note in her file and looked up with an expression that suggested she was building a case for prosecution. Lieutenant Martinez, your service record shows multiple instances of what your commanders have described as creative interpretation of orders. During your deployment in Iraq, you apparently took your tank through a crowded marketplace to evacuate wounded Iraqi police officers, despite explicit orders to maintain perimeter security. Martinez remembered that incident clearly. 3 Iraqi police officers had been wounded in a suicide bombing while conducting a joint patrol with American forces. The normal evacuation route had been blocked by rubble, and medical personnel couldn't reach the wounded officers through the maze of destroyed buildings and burning vehicles. Yes, ma'am. The Iraqi officers had been providing crucial intelligence about insurgent activities in the area. They were wounded while conducting operations in support of American forces. I determined that their evacuation was a tactical priority that superseded static perimeter security. And 6 months later in Ramadi, Major Torres continued, flipping through her notes, you apparently used your tank to bulldoze through a concrete barrier to reach a school where American contractors were under siege, despite orders to wait for engineering support to clear the obstacle. That incident had been more complicated. The contractors were teachers and engineers working to rebuild schools destroyed by insurgent attacks. They had been trapped in a partially constructed building by a coordinated attack that had cut off all normal access routes. Engineering support was 2 hours away, and the contractors were running out of ammunition. The contractors were providing essential services to help rebuild Iraqi infrastructure. They were under attack by insurgent forces, and standard support would not have arrived in time to prevent casualties. I made a tactical assessment that the concrete barrier could be safely breached with minimal risk to civilian structures. Colonel Harrison exchanged a look with Major Torres that suggested they had discussed this pattern of behavior extensively. Lieutenant, I'm beginning to see a trend here. You seem to have a habit of making unilateral decisions that technically violate orders but somehow always work out for the best. Martinez realized she was at a crossroads that would define not just her military career but her entire future. She could apologize, express regret for her decisions, and hope for leniency. Or she could stand by her actions and accept whatever consequences followed. Sir, I've spent 5 years commanding tank crews in combat zones. I've learned that sometimes the difference between mission success and mission failure comes down to someone being willing to make hard decisions quickly. I've never taken unauthorized action for personal glory or advancement. Every time I've bent regulations, it's been to save American lives or protect people who were supporting American operations. That's exactly what worries me, Major Torres interjected. Your pattern of behavior suggests a fundamental disregard for military hierarchy and proper authorization procedures. Military discipline exists for good reasons, Lieutenant. When soldiers start making independent decisions about when to follow orders and when to ignore them, the entire command structure breaks down. Martinez felt her temper rising but forced herself to remain calm and professional. Ma'am, military discipline also requires leaders to make responsible decisions when faced with unexpected circumstances. The SEAL team that I supported 3 days ago was alive because someone was willing to act quickly when traditional support systems failed. Colonel Harrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling activity of the forward operating base. Apache helicopters were taking off for patrol missions, supply convoys were forming up for dangerous runs through hostile territory, and soldiers were conducting the hundreds of routine tasks that kept military operations functioning in a combat zone. Lieutenant Martinez, I've been in command positions for 15 years. I've seen good officers destroy their careers by thinking they knew better than their superiors. I've also seen good soldiers die because someone was too worried about regulations to make the hard call when it mattered. The question is, which category do you fall into? Before Martinez could respond, there was a knock on the conference room door. A young corporal entered with a message folder marked urgent and handed it directly to Colonel Harrison. Sir, this just came in from CENTCOM. Priority message for your immediate attention. Colonel Harrison opened the folder and read the contents quickly, his expression shifting from stern authority to genuine surprise. He handed the message to Major Torres, who read it with growing amazement. Lieutenant Martinez, Colonel Harrison said slowly, it seems that your unauthorized rescue mission has attracted some very high-level attention. This message is from General Patricia Williams, Commanding General of all Army forces in Afghanistan. She wants to see you immediately. Martinez felt her world tilt slightly. General Williams was a legend in the Army, one of the first women to command armored divisions in combat and, widely considered one of the most tactically brilliant officers of her generation. Being summoned to see her could mean anything from immediate court-martial to unexpected recognition. Sir, do you know what the general wants to discuss? According to this message, the general has received detailed reports about your tank operations in mountainous terrain from multiple sources, including the Navy SEALs you rescued and several Army aviation units that observed your vehicle movement. Apparently, she's very interested in discussing your tactical innovations. Major Torres looked up from the message with an expression that suggested the legal proceedings she had been preparing might need to be postponed. Colonel, this message also indicates that the Secretary of Defense has been briefed on the rescue operation and has requested a full tactical analysis of Lieutenant Martinez's methods. Martinez realized that what she had thought was a local disciplinary matter had somehow escalated into something much larger. The rescue operation that she had considered a straightforward tactical decision was apparently being analyzed at the highest levels of military command. Lieutenant, Colonel Harrison continued, you'll be flying to Bagram Air Base this afternoon for a meeting with General Williams. I suggest you prepare a detailed briefing on your tactical decision-making process and be ready to explain exactly how you managed to get an M1 Abrams tank through terrain that our maps indicate should be impossible for tracked vehicles. As Martinez prepared to leave the conference room, Major Torres handed her a folder containing copies of all the reports that had been filed about the rescue operation. Lieutenant, you might want to read these before your meeting with the general. Apparently, your little mountain climbing expedition has generated quite a bit of interest among people who understand armored warfare. Walking back to her quarters to prepare for the flight to Bagram, Martinez reflected on how quickly circumstances could change in military life. 3 days ago, she had been a tank commander conducting routine training exercises. Now she was apparently being summoned to explain her tactics to one of the most senior generals in the Army. Her crew was waiting for her when she reached the motor pool where their M1 Abrams was undergoing post-mission maintenance. Sergeant Foster was meticulously checking track tension while the other crew members cleaned and inspected equipment with the kind of attention to detail that kept tanks operational in harsh combat environments. Ma'am, how did the meeting go? Foster asked without looking up from his work. His tone was carefully neutral, but Martinez could see the concern in his posture. Well, Sergeant, it looks like our little mountain climbing adventure has attracted some attention from very senior people. I'm flying to Bagram this afternoon to brief General Williams on our tactical methods. The entire crew stopped what they were doing and looked at Martinez with expressions ranging from amazement to concern. General Williams was known throughout the Army, and being summoned to brief her was either a very good sign or a very bad one. Ma'am, said Specialist Johnson, the tank's gunner, do you think we're in trouble for going off the training route? Martinez considered how to answer that question honestly. The truth was that she had no idea what General Williams wanted to discuss, but she was beginning to suspect that the rescue operation had implications far beyond the immediate tactical situation. I think, Specialist, that we're about to find out whether the Army values innovative thinking or strict adherence to regulations more. Either way, we saved 8 Navy SEALs who would have been killed or captured without our intervention. That's got to count for something. Sergeant Foster finally looked up from his track inspection with the kind of expression that suggested he had reached an important conclusion. Ma'am, I've been thinking about what we accomplished 3 days ago. We proved that M1 Abrams tanks can operate effectively in terrain that every manual says is impossible. We proved that tank crews can provide close support to infantry units in situations where no other support is available. And we proved that sometimes the best way to follow orders is to accomplish the mission even when the methods aren't explicitly authorized. Martinez realized that Foster had articulated something that she had been feeling but hadn't been able to express clearly. Their mountain rescue operation had been about more than just saving 8 Navy SEALs, as important as that was. They had demonstrated capabilities and tactics that could fundamentally change how armored units were employed in mountainous terrain. "Sergeant, you may have just identified why General Williams wants to see us. If our methods can be refined and taught to other tank crews, it could significantly expand the tactical options available to commanders in terrain like Afghanistan." As Martinez prepared for her flight to Bagram, she realized that what had started as a split-second decision to help fellow soldiers might have evolved into something with much broader implications for military tactics and doctrine. The next few hours would determine whether her career would be defined by disciplinary action or unexpected opportunity. The helicopter that would take her to Bagram was already warming up on the landing pad, its rotors creating the familiar whirlwind of dust and noise that marked every military movement in Afghanistan. As she walked toward the aircraft with her briefing materials and service record, Martinez wondered whether she would return as a disgraced former tank commander or as someone whose tactical innovations had earned recognition from the highest levels of military command. Either way, she knew that she would never regret the decision to risk everything to save 8 Navy SEALs who were facing certain death in the mountains of Afghanistan. The morning sun cast long shadows across the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush Mountains as Chief Petty Officer Marcus Wolf Rodriguez adjusted his scope for the third time in 10 minutes. Something felt wrong. The valley below their observation post had been too quiet for the past hour, and, in his 12 years as a Navy SEAL, Rodriguez had learned to trust his instincts more than any piece of equipment. "Anything on thermal?" he whispered into his headset, keeping his voice barely audible to his spotter, Petty Officer First Class Jamie Chen, who lay motionless beside him. Chen slowly moved his thermal imaging device across the rocky terrain below. "Negative on movement, but I'm picking up some heat signatures behind those boulders at our 2 o'clock. Could be goats, could be something else." Rodriguez grimaced. They had been in position since 0300 hours, conducting surveillance on a suspected Taliban weapons cache hidden somewhere in the maze of caves and rocky outcroppings that dotted this particular section of the Khyber province. Intelligence had been solid, satellite imagery showed unusual movement patterns, and intercepted communications suggested a major arms shipment had arrived in the area within the last 72 hours. The 8-man SEAL team had inserted via helicopter at a landing zone 12 clicks south of their current position. The night movement through treacherous mountain terrain had been grueling but uneventful. Now, split into 2 4-man teams, they maintained overwatch positions on opposite ridges, creating a surveillance net that should have given them early warning of any hostile activity. "Razor 6, this is Overwatch 2, Rodriguez spoke quietly into his radio, establishing contact with the second team positioned on the neighboring ridge. "Sit rep." The response came immediately from Senior Chief Petty Officer David Hammer Thompson, the team's second-in-command. "Overwatch 2 has eyes on the target building. No movement detected in the last 45 minutes. We've got good coverage of the eastern approaches." Rodriguez felt marginally better knowing Thompson's team was in position and alert. Thompson was a legend in the SEAL community, with 3 Purple Hearts and a Navy Cross earned during operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. If anyone could spot trouble coming, it would be him. The mission was supposed to be straightforward: establish surveillance, confirm the presence of the weapons cache, and call in a precision airstrike to eliminate the threat. No direct engagement was planned unless absolutely necessary. The area was considered too dangerous for a ground assault, with multiple escape routes available to enemy forces and terrain that heavily favored defenders over attackers. "Wolf, you need to see this," Chen's urgent whisper broke Rodriguez's concentration. "Movement on the southern ridge, approximately 800 meters. I count at least 12 individuals, and they're moving with purpose." Rodriguez immediately shifted his scope to the indicated position. What he saw made his blood run cold. A group of armed men was moving in tactical formation along a goat path that would eventually bring them within striking distance of Thompson's position. Worse yet, they were moving with the discipline and coordination that suggested military training rather than the loose organization typical of local militia. "Overwatch 2, you've got company coming up your back door," Rodriguez transmitted immediately. "Southern ridge, 800 meters and closing. At least 12 hostiles in tactical formation." Thompson's response was calm but carried an undercurrent of tension. "Roger that, Overwatch 1. We see them now. Looks like they know exactly where they're going." As Rodriguez continued to observe the approaching force, his worst fears were confirmed. This wasn't a random patrol or coincidental presence. The enemy fighters were moving directly toward known SEAL positions with a confidence that suggested detailed intelligence about American operations in the area. "Chen, start packing our gear. We need to be ready to move," Rodriguez ordered while maintaining his observation of the developing situation. "Something's not right about this whole setup." Before Chen could respond, the radio crackled with urgent transmissions from Thompson's team. "Contact! Contact! We're taking fire from multiple positions. This is a coordinated ambush." They knew exactly where to find us. The sound of automatic weapons fire echoed across the valley, creating a deadly symphony that every SEAL had heard too many times before. Rodriguez could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different positions around Thompson's team, and the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Hammer, what's your status?" Rodriguez called out while scanning for additional threats. "We're pinned down behind a rock formation. Enemy has us surrounded on 3 sides. We've got wounded and limited ammunition. They're closing in fast." Rodriguez's mind raced through their options. Standard procedure would be to call for immediate extraction via helicopter, but the nearest available aircraft was at least 20 minutes away. In a firefight like this, 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. "Chen, get on the radio to base. Request immediate close air support and emergency extraction. Tell them we have a team in contact and need everything they can send us." As Chen worked frantically with the radio, Rodriguez continued to provide overwatch for Thompson's embattled team. He could see enemy fighters maneuvering to flank their position, and it was clear that without immediate intervention, his fellow SEALs would be overwhelmed within minutes. "Base, this is Overwatch 1 requesting immediate CAS and emergency extraction for Overwatch 2. Team in contact, surrounded, with wounded. Situation critical," Chen transmitted with professional calm despite the urgency of the situation. The response from base was not what they wanted to hear. "Overwatch 1, be advised that weather conditions have grounded all available aircraft. Closest CAS is 45 minutes out. Extraction helicopter cannot launch until weather improves. You are instructed to break contact and move to extraction point Bravo for pickup when conditions permit." Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. 45 minutes was an eternity in combat, and breaking contact meant abandoning Thompson's team to their fate. That was not an option that any SEAL would ever consider. "Negative, base. We will not abandon Overwatch 2. Request any available ground support in the area. Stand by, Overwatch 1. While waiting for a response, Rodriguez could see that Thompson's situation was becoming desperate. Enemy fighters were now moving within grenade range of his position, and the volume of return fire from the SEAL team was noticeably decreasing. "Wolf, they're almost out of ammo," Chen observed grimly. "We need to do something now." Rodriguez made a decision that went against every tactical doctrine he had ever learned. "Chen, you maintain overwatch and radio contact. I'm moving down to support Hammer's team." "That's suicide, Chief. You can't cross that much open ground without getting torn apart." "Maybe, but I'm not leaving those guys to die while I sit up here safe and sound." Before Rodriguez could begin his dangerous movement toward Thompson's position, the radio crackled with an unexpected transmission that would change everything. "Any SEAL units in grid square 47823, this is Iron Thunder. I've got 60 tons of freedom and I'm looking for a good fight. What's your status?" Rodriguez grabbed the radio with renewed hope. Iron Thunder was the call sign for an M1 Abrams tank, though he couldn't imagine how armored vehicles had gotten into this mountainous terrain. "Iron Thunder, this is Overwatch 1. We have a SEAL team surrounded and taking heavy casualties. Grid reference follows." Rodriguez quickly transmitted the exact coordinates of Thompson's position. "Roger that, Overwatch 1. Iron Thunder is en route. ETA 3 minutes. Advise your people to keep their heads down. 3 minutes." Rodriguez found himself counting seconds as he watched enemy fighters closing in on Thompson's position. The sound of gunfire was becoming more sporadic from the SEAL side, indicating that ammunition was critically low. "Hammer, Iron Thunder inbound in 3 minutes.
can you hold that long?
We'll hold. Thompson's voice was strained but determined.
Tell them to bring everything they've got.
Rodriguez had served alongside tank crews during operations in Iraq, but he had never seen an M1 Abrams operate in terrain like this. The mountains seemed impossible for tracked vehicles, with steep slopes, loose rock, and narrow passages that would challenge even the most experienced drivers. As the 3-minute mark approached, Rodriguez could hear something that sounded like distant thunder growing louder by the second. The enemy fighters around Thompson's position seemed to hear it too, as some of them began looking around nervously. Then, impossibly, an M1 Abrams tank crested the ridge directly above Thompson's position like some kind of mechanical cavalry charge from another century.
The sight was so unexpected and dramatic that even Rodriguez found himself staring in amazement.
The tank's main gun spoke once, and the entire mountainside seemed to shudder. The 120mm high explosive round landed directly in the center of the largest concentration of enemy fighters, and the explosion created a rain of rock and dust that could be seen for miles.
This is Iron Thunder.
The cavalry has arrived.
All SEAL units, mark your positions with smoke. Danger close fire mission in progress.
Rodriguez watched in fascination as the tank continued its impossible advance down the rocky slope, its tracks somehow finding purchase on terrain that seemed suitable only for mountain goats. Whoever was driving that beast had skills that bordered on the supernatural. The tank's coaxial machine gun opened fire, raking the positions that had been suppressing Thompson's team. Enemy fighters who had been advancing confidently just minutes before were now running for cover, caught completely off guard by the arrival of armored support in terrain where tanks weren't supposed to exist.
Overwatch 1, this is Hammer. Iron Thunder just saved our lives.
Enemy forces are breaking contact and withdrawing.
We've got 2 wounded, but all personnel are alive and mobile. Rodriguez felt a surge of relief that left him momentarily weak.
Professional soldiers were trained not to get emotionally attached to outcomes, but watching fellow SEALs face almost certain death had tested every limit of his mental discipline.
Iron Thunder, this is Overwatch 1. Outstanding work. How did you manage to get a tank into this terrain?
The response came in a female voice that carried a slight southern accent and a tone of casual confidence that suggested this kind of impossible operation was just another day at the office. Overwatch 1, this is Lieutenant Martinez commanding Iron Thunder. When you've been driving tanks as long as I have, you learn that impossible is just another word for hasn't been tried yet. Plus, I've got the best driver in the army and a crew that doesn't know the meaning of the word quit. Over the next hour, Lieutenant Martinez and her tank crew provided covering fire while both SEAL teams moved to a secure extraction point. The enemy forces, thoroughly demoralized by the unexpected arrival of heavy armor, melted away into the mountains without attempting further contact. As Rodriguez finally got a close look at the tank that had saved his team's lives, he was amazed to see relatively little damage despite the brutal terrain it had traversed. The driver, a young sergeant named Mike Foster, was grinning broadly as he performed post-operation maintenance checks. "How in the hell did you get this thing up here?" Rodriguez asked Lieutenant Martinez as she climbed down from the commander's hatch. Martinez was younger than he had expected, probably not more than 28 years old, with the kind of calm confidence that came from someone who had proven herself in combat multiple times. Her uniform showed the wear and dust of hard mountain driving, but her equipment was meticulously maintained and her crew moved with the precision of a championship racing team. "We were conducting a training exercise about 15 clicks from here when we picked up your radio traffic. I made a command decision that my training route needed some adjustments," she said with a slight smile. "Besides, the manual says tanks can't do a lot of things that I've found they actually can do if you're willing to think outside the box." Rodriguez realized that this young lieutenant had risked her career, her equipment, and her life to save his team. Going off the planned training route to engage in combat operations without direct orders was the kind of decision that could result in court-martial proceedings. "Lieutenant, you do realize you probably just violated about 15 different regulations by bringing your tank here?" Martinez's smile widened. "Chief, you do realize that I just saved 8 Navy SEALs from certain death or capture? I figure the paperwork will sort itself out eventually. Besides, my tank crew needed some real-world terrain practice, and you guys provided the perfect training scenario." As they waited for helicopter extraction at the secure landing zone, Rodriguez found himself impressed not just by Martinez's tactical skills but by her leadership style. Her crew clearly respected and trusted her completely, following her orders without hesitation even when those orders led them into situations that would have challenged far more experienced tank commanders. "Ma'am, I've worked with a lot of armored units over the years, but I've never seen tank driving like what your sergeant pulled off today."
"How long have you two been working together?" "Foster and I have been crewing together for about 18 months.
He's from West Virginia, grew up driving logging trucks through mountains that would make these hills look like a parking lot. When he told me he thought we could make it up that ridge, I trusted his judgment." The extraction helicopters arrived just as the sun reached its peak, and Rodriguez watched with mixed emotions as the tank crew prepared to return to their base. Lieutenant Martinez had appeared in his life for less than 2 hours, but she had fundamentally changed his perspective on what was possible when soldiers were willing to trust each other completely and think beyond conventional limitations. "Chief Rodriguez," Martinez called out as he prepared to board the helicopter. "If you ever need someone to drive through impossible terrain again, just call Iron Thunder. We'll be there." As the helicopter lifted off and carried the SEAL teams to safety, Rodriguez looked back at the M1 Abrams tank beginning its careful descent down the mountainside. He knew that what he had witnessed was more than just exceptional driving or tactical innovation. He had seen leadership, courage, and the kind of split-second decision-making that separated truly great soldiers from merely good ones. The mission report would be classified, but the story of Lieutenant Sarah Martinez and her impossible tank rescue would spread through the military community like wildfire. Sometimes legends were born not from planned operations or official recognition, but from moments when someone decided that saving lives was more important than following rules. In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where every shadow could hide an enemy and every ridge could become a grave, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez made a decision that would either save 8 Navy SEALs or seal their fate forever. With Taliban fighters closing in from 3 sides and ammunition running dangerously low, the elite soldiers had minutes before capture or death became their only options. What happened next would become legendary in military circles, not just for the impossible rescue that followed, but for the split-second decision made by a 28-year-old tank commander who chose to disobey direct orders rather than abandon her fellow warriors. This is the true story of how 60 tons of American steel and one woman's unbreakable courage turned certain defeat into miraculous survival, proving that sometimes the difference between life and death comes down to someone willing to risk everything for the sacred bond between soldiers. The events that unfolded on that scorching July morning in 2019 would challenge everything the military thought it knew about armored warfare in mountain terrain, and demonstrate that heroism often comes from the most unexpected directions. What started as a routine reconnaissance mission would become a testament to the power of quick thinking, unwavering loyalty, and the thunderous roar of an M1 Abrams tank appearing where tanks were never supposed to go.